Okay, good morning. Welcome to our third day of the virtual summit. Hope you're refreshed and ready to go, and looking forward to another interesting and action-packed day. We've got some great presentations throughout the day. The first presentation, the keynote this morning, is from Jeremy Payne from Enghouse, and Jeremy is going to be looking at an interesting topic: how to survive and thrive in the new CX jungle. So, Jeremy, welcome to the stage. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you to all of you for taking the time out this morning to join myself and Jonathan with this presentation. We've been fortunate to be invited by Britannic to do this event for many years, actually, and this is the first year it's virtual. So normally this slot would be the first slot directly after everyone went out last night and had too many beers. So hopefully the heads this morning probably aren't quite as fuzzy as they normally are. So we've been a partner with Enghouse with Britannic for many years. For those of you that don't know, Enghouse Interactive, we're a software company. We've been around for almost 35 years now. So we've faced over those years almost every scenario and challenge you could imagine in terms of contact centers and customer experience. So a lot of slides to get through this morning, so it will move fairly quickly. If you've got any interesting or difficult, challenging questions, save them up and we'll try and knock them out of the park at the end. So I think most people started this year with a perception of how things would be, and that perception would be pretty similar to the one they ended last year with, and probably not that dissimilar to the perception they ended the year before with. And most people see the world through a lens, and most people think that lens is pretty much right and how things actually are. And then things happen. Your perspective gets shifted whether you like it or not. And it's happened in a really profound way this year, and happened in a way none of us could have ever expected or anticipated. But that said, these shifts and changes are happening all the time. They were happening last year, the year before, and the year before that, and they'll happen next year and the year after. So the important thing is to think about, where we are. And right now, there are no knowns. We're right in the middle of a work from home experiment and a customer experience and customer service experiment. And I think many organizations and probably employees have been surprised at how much they've enjoyed working from home at times. I think many organizations are probably reading the fine print in their commercial office leases to understand, how much office space do we really need and how quickly can we get out of this contract. Productivity has gone up, and there's lots and lots of positives, but there are also many negatives. Like everything in life, the yin and yang of life, where there's an equal, there's an opposite. And for many organizations, there were underlying structural problems in the way they'd organized their customer experience. Most businesses, if you think about it, are structured in vertical silos: sales, marketing, finance, HR, operations, IT, all vertical departments. When we think about customer service, customer experience, or more importantly, a customer journey, they run horizontally, left to right. They straddle multiple departments. And it's rare that you have a single customer interaction that doesn't need the input of more than one of those departments. So if you had those kind of structural problems and you've moved into a virtual world, probably right now you're sat with a Band-Aid and an elastoplast over some of those issues, and you've really just virtualized or photocopied the problem into a virtual world. And the problem is, we were asking customers to navigate some of those challenges before all of the challenges of this year came along. And for many organizations, those challenges have been exacerbated. A little bit like when you have an earthquake, the cracks that were already there have been widened and made deeper. And, we're left with our customers now having to literally jump across those silos to get their customer journey to work. And I think in one degree, whilst people are, more accepting and more tolerant of the fact that, everyone's doing their best to make things work this year, as we enter into next year, that tolerance is going to get less and less. So for a variety of reasons, these things need to be fixed. Many organizations structured themselves understandably around communication channels. So we had a department that handled calls or a call center. We had another department or group of people that were doing social media. Somebody else was doing emails or inbound physical paper. It all sounds logical, but again, when we start to think about a joined up, holistic, unified customer experience, those sorts of silos don't help. Many organizations put in place a measurement framework that was based around tasks. And if you think about a car assembly line, a task could be putting the engine in or putting the wheels on. And whilst it's acceptable to say, well, we've put the engine in and we've put the wheels on, if there's no seats in the car, you can't drive it. So this is the same, that actually when you look at how a customer would measure what good looks like or what the right outcome is for them, and then you overlay how many organizations are measuring what they're doing, there's quite a big disconnect. And then finally, as we think about system and structural system policy, people, process rigidity, many organizations have had to rapidly virtualize through this year and have found some or many of their systems just aren't really agile enough to be able to do that. And ultimately, all of this cascades into the lap of the customer. I think there's probably not one of us that hasn't had some sort of experience with trying to go on holiday this summer and haven't had some sort of issue. And then equally has tried to contact the travel provider who's just been completely overwhelmed for all of the reasons we just covered. And so many organizations have found themselves trying to compress 5 years of natural evolution and development into 5 months, and have now sort of sat as we kind of enter the run in towards Christmas and the start of the next year, living in a little bit of a box. They just about got things working to a point where, to use the analogy, the plane's still in the air, but it's not flying particularly well and it's not flying particularly straight. It's not efficient. It's not providing great customer experience, and is exposed to risk. And so many organizations are sat at this point, starting to think more strategically and less tactically. This year has been probably one of the most tactical years, for customer experience, solutions on record. Many organizations have had to scramble literally in hours to change the way they work to be able to keep things going. And credit to them, they've done that. But moving forward, that's not sustainable. And it exposes the business to regulatory and security risks, as well as potentially staff churn and staff turnover and customer disappointments. So we all know we need to be agile. We've been talking about agility, I think, for it's got to be at least the last 20 years. There's not a lot new in terms of thinking about agility. So I guess some of the questions are, what is agility and why hasn't it happened, and why is it so difficult to make happen? And when we look at agility, we see organizations that are dynamic, they're aligned around their customers, they're focused on digital products and not digital projects. Many IT departments historically with a waterfall kind of development approach, big projects that get bigger and bigger and bigger, timelines that extend and extend, and ultimately don't really deliver the value back to the business. More of an agile mindset, looking on sprints and lean approaches to deliver what the customer wants is key. We see organizations that have a continuous improvement culture. They're using data to A/B test and simulate and test out better ways of working. And probably most importantly, they have a culture, and a culture that is agile in mindset and pragmatic about getting the job done and getting something achieved at the end of each week, month, year. And the reality is, the honest truth is, Enghouse is a software company. I wish I could sit here and say to you, look, we've just got this magic piece of software. If you buy this, it will make all your problems go away. And the truth is, whether the software comes from Enghouse or any of Britannic's other partners, most of the software challenge is relatively straightforward to fix. Most of the software that you would need is already there and in place and able to be leveraged. The big challenge is actually, the structural ones and the cultural ones. And if we're completely honest, the culture piece has got harder. 90% of communication is non-verbal, and as great as video conferencing platforms are, and Enghouse have a pretty good one themselves called Video, as great as they are, it's not the same as sitting in a room face to face with somebody. And so as we start to think about solving more complex customer experience problems, you need that cultural sort of joined up approach to get there. And we see organizations starting to wrestle with this. We see organizations that were used to measuring, particularly contact center agents, in a fairly quantitative way. How many calls did you handle? What was your average handle time? What was the abandon rate? All the stuff that's easy to measure, and missing some of the softer stuff that's actually really important. So creating that culture that's based around trust and transparency is key. And that's something I think many organizations will be looking to fix through the next year. So Enghouse has something approaching close to 4,000 customers across the UK, all doing different solving customer experience challenges and problem. And we're fortunate, we work with partners like Britannic, and we get to see candidly the good, bad and the ugly. We get to see the people that are doing it right, and some of those that are finding it harder to do it right. And so one of the things that we do tend to see is what we call a digital by design approach. And by that, I mean, if you've ever used a low-cost airline, you're not dealing with a digital by design approach. You're dealing with digital by default. That organization does not want to speak to you. They don't really want to interact with you. The process is engineered deliberately so that it's very, very hard for you to interact with a human, and you're having to put a lot of effort in yourself as a customer when things go wrong to fix the situation. And there's a trade-off. The price of the ticket is really cheap. You go into it knowing you're probably not going to get a VIP service. But for most organizations, that isn't the model that's going to be right for them, and they need a more cerebral, intelligent approach. And we see this approach of digital by design being key to that. And digital by design is really about thinking about customer journeys running left to right, aligning front, middle, back office, people, process, policy, and system to those customer journeys, and also leveraging what the customer is capable of. If we think about customers these days, and we think about 5G and the capability that's going to be in people's pocket, customers are very willing to self-serve. The tools that you can provide them with are really powerful, as long as you give them a useful tool and a way of doing it. Customers will work with you to get there. We hear a lot about data. And so, this time last year, everyone was talking about AI and bots. And that was going to be the nirvana, the thing that solved everyone's customer service problem. And the reality is, there's a lot of talk about data. And in truth, yes, data is super important, but not all data is equal. And once you understand your customer journeys, you'll be able to really identify the data that you need and the data you don't need to worry about. When we think about AI and bots, they really are only ever as good as the data you've underpinned it with. And we always say, start from the premise, and it sounds obvious, but start from the premise of what your customers want. Many people quite rapidly end up in an IT project mindset and rapidly lose sight of why they're doing this and what the right outcome is. Always at the front of mind, keep in mind, what if you were a customer, what do you want? And we're all customers, and we're all wired pretty much the same way. We want the outcome that we want in the fastest time possible, with the least amount of investment of effort and time on our part. And for those of you that have used Amazon, to buy stuff, and I would imagine in the last 6 months, that's almost everyone, you'll find that they have customer journeys and customer processes that are really highly optimized. They're using data in a really intelligent way. You're not having to repeat information about yourself. You're not having to keep typing in the 3 digits on your credit card to be able to make a purchase. They're using data to understand who you are, understand what people like you have bought, and get you through that journey as quickly as possible, and candidly extract as much revenue out of you as possible. So, intelligent, optimized customer journeys give the customer what they want and are also good business for the organization. We've talked a little bit about 5G mobility, and I think as we start to move through the next couple of years, if you think about what the app on your phone can do today, that is going to become ever more powerful. The ability to triangulate the information on you as a customer, or what we would call your digital DNA, is really key. So part of that process, when we talked about the Amazon example, Amazon is not asking you to repeat any information that you've ever shared with them again. And there's nothing more frustrating for a customer when you're having to repeat your name and your address and your postcode when you've already given it to them 10 times and it was on the order they shipped to you last week. So, really thinking about how do we optimize that journey and cut out unnecessary steps is key. We've talked about, AI and robots, briefly, and, it's another whole presentation in itself. But candidly, the best intelligence in your business isn't artificial. It's in the minds of your customers, and it's in the mind of your employees. What we found in the customer experience space is, AI and bots have a really significant role to play, can, create great efficiencies for the organization, be highly cost effective and deliver great service. However, they tend to work very, very well in predefined scenarios. So a little bit like a roundabout with 3 exits. If you know what the 3 exits are, an AI or a bot is going to thrive in that situation. If it's white space and the outcome and the destination's not completely known, you're going to need to invest huge amounts of money in the underpinning data to get there. So that's why you tend to see them used heavily in, for example, the travel industry, because the customer journey and the outcomes, the inputs and outcomes are exactly the same, whatever type of customer it is. They work well in that type of space. So if we start to think about, what skills are most organizations going to need moving forward? When we look at agile enterprises, they've got a really good balance between, man and machine automation and human intervention. And if you've got customer self-serving, if you're leveraging AI and bots in a smart way, by definition, the stuff that's left is the awkward, ugly, complex stuff. And there's a pretty high probability that people that you have within your contact center right now don't have all the skills or the right skills that you need. The type of skills that you're going to need are people like, for example, in this one, Natalie, the negotiator. If you're a travel company, as an example again, you're going to have a lot of customers this year complaining about the agreement, the service they received, and they're going to want compensation. And that's going to have to be negotiated within parameters, but also with a degree of autonomy and authority that in this case, Natalie is empowered to make decisions that are right for the customer and right for the business, and try and conclude, that problem and issue as quickly as possible. When we think about customer, technical customer service problems, you're going to need somebody like Tony the techie. Tony will understand your products really well. Once you get through to Tony, he'll be able to ask you a couple of questions, assimilate in his mind what the problem is, and share it back to you. And then what Tony might do is pass that on to Chris, the outsource or crowdsource advisor, who is going to share that through social media. He's going to share it in your user forums and on your website, so that the next time a customer who has the identical problem goes onto Google and types that problem in, an answer pops up. So they may have the ability to self-serve. Customer gets what they want quickly, and the organization has had to spend more of Tony's time keep solving the same problem again and again. So the skill sets are going to be different, and I think most organizations aren't going to be able to afford to employ a Natalie the negotiator full time, and so you may well see somebody like Natalie the negotiator becomes kind of part of the gig economy. They will have maybe a legal background, they've specialized in, let's say, the travel industry, and they may work for 3, 4, 5 different travel companies virtually as and when they're needed. They get pulled into a customer interaction, ad hoc, real time, to help offer their input and just bill on a per case basis. So one of the other things that we see organizations that are agile have is this concept of a digital twin. And put simply, this is the ability to A/B test. If we model out the journey this way, what outcome do we get? If we remove this step in the customer process, does it give a better experience and accelerate the journey time? The ability to sort of test and try things in a safe way is key to being able to be agile and key to being able to continuously improve. This job will never be done. So you're never going to arrive at the nirvana. So you constantly have to keep working to improve it. So having that ability to adjust, adapt, and change and learn is key. Top point. One of probably the first questions we get asked as we start to talk to prospective customers about digital by design is, where do I start? How do I start? And if you think about it, most organizations have, if you look at your interactions and you look at the data, 20% of your interactions will drive most of the cost in your business. The interactions where you have to give lots of money back to customers or repay things or compensate. You have 20% of the journeys in your business will drive 80% of the revenue and the sales and the profit. And there'll be 20% of the journeys that drive most regulatory risk. If you're a bank doing, consumer mortgages, has a whole layer of regulatory risk around it. So once you understand what are the journeys, the top journeys that drive cost, revenue, and compliance, you've got a really good place to start. And then we can start to think about, the personas and the profiles of the people that are interacting. What are the channels that those customers come through typically? And now we can start to think about optimizing those journeys. Roughly speaking, again, this is like another whole presentation in itself, but in the space of a minute, when we start to model out, customers' journeys, typically they flow something like this. So the left-hand side of the screen really is that, Natalie the negotiator, Tony the techie side of the screen. It's human intervention assisted by bots. So the bot, for example, real-time speech analytics, might be listening to an interaction in the background, and it might be going off and retrieving information for Natalie or Tony to be able to provide a better experience. The right-hand side of the screen is the automated self-service or social service kind of route, where it's not really being touched by the organization staff. And one of the most key things is, where we see this grey box 10.7 with the cross in it, is building an escalation path. You have to, when you have an automated route, build in escalation paths. So if things go wrong, if a customer gets stuck, if they don't have that piece of information to give to you, it can flip over to the left-hand side of the screen for human intervention. And again, most importantly, as it flips over, that you don't lose all the context. So when we talked about Amazon and not having to type the 3 digits of your card in again, as you flip from one side to the other, that you can't lose the context. You can't have the human asking who your name and your address is again. All of the input and investment you made to get part way through the automated journey needs to transfer over. So if we start to sort of think about what are the top 5 tips we would say focus on the channels that really matter most. So if you understand the journeys, the top journeys that drive, cost, revenue, and risk, and now we start to think about what are the channels that your customers interact with you through. Huge amounts of hype about all the other different channels available, like social media. But in truth, we sponsor the Contact Babel Buyer's Guide survey every year. It's a brilliant report, over 100 pages long, and goes into where the world is at in terms of customer service in great detail. It's well worth a read if you're interested. But I mean, what that report tells you consistently is over the last 3 years, the majority of interactions either fall into the email and telephone bucket. Last couple of years, we're seeing an increase in web chat. But if you really get your telephone and your email channels working really nicely on your top journeys, you've started and you've got all the low hanging fruit out of the way. Put it that way. Automate where it makes sense. So this is probably the crux of digital by design. It's not automate everything and automate as much as possible to reduce cost. It's about using automation and self-service in an intelligent way. If you don't do that, you're likely to end up in the low-cost airline bucket, and your business model probably isn't geared up for that. So intelligent automation. Invest in the people and the processes and the policies for the stuff that can't be automated. And that again is the Natalie negotiator type scenario. You've got to have highly skilled people that can deal with the complex problems. Ideally having a collaboration environment, unified communications. Microsoft Teams as an example is a great way for people to collaborate together on solving a complex problem. One of the worst mistakes people make when they put automation in is see it as a cost-saving exercise. They save a lot of money initially, but then a few months later realize their customer satisfaction's gone through the floor. You've got to invest in the awkward, ugly stuff as well. Think about measurements. We all like to measure the easy stuff. Average handle time, how many calls completed, what abandonment rate, all of that type of stuff. But the reality is, measuring the softer stuff. How does the customer feel? How did they feel coming into the interaction? How did they feel leaving the interaction? How do your staff feel? When you use a platform like real-time speech analytics, it can sense when people are stressed and when people are becoming aggressive or not happy. And they're all kind of triggers for you to think, okay, we need to make an intervention here, either with the customer or with your employee. And particularly at the moment, thinking about how you measure your employees is going to be key as you enter next year. We talked about driving a continuous improvement culture, and it doesn't really matter what methodology you use, whether it's Six Sigma or something else, but having that mindset and culture of continuously trying to improve is key. And finally, and again, another whole presentation in itself, but doing it all securely. Working with trusted partners, particularly as you start to move things into the cloud, is key. Security is a little bit like a bike chain, and your security of your whole organization and all of your systems and all of your customer data is only ever as good as the weakest link in that chain. So as you start trying to glue different applications and technologies together and effectively do system integration in the cloud, super important that you work with a credible and trusted partner like Britannic, and you work with underlying vendors, people like Microsoft, Cisco, Avaya, that really understand security. If you haven't got that piece right, you really are setting yourself up for a fall. So just to give you a sense of some of the supporting materials that we've got available, all of the things that we've talked about today, one of the benefits, I guess, of having nearly 4,000 customers is we've got quite a few reference points and case studies. If you're looking for information around collaboration, one example would be Futures Housing Group, an organization that has moved to more of a virtual world. They have crossed that Microsoft Teams chasm, so using Microsoft Teams and Enghouse to deliver their customer support. If you're looking at AI examples, Fujitsu, large global company, but they also run basically outsourced help desk, IT help desk for many, many different businesses. And again, when we talked about the roundabout with the 3 known exits, most IT help desk problems have already happened before, and the answer to fix them is already known before. So sits and lends itself really nicely to AI and automation. If we're thinking about co-browsing and that sort of balance between web chat, co-browsing, and human intervention, so a journey that might start with the customer, in this case self-serving on their website, and then a human intervention through web chat to support them. If we're thinking about escalation, so when we showed the slide talking about the right-hand journey all automated and the left-hand journey human intervention, Ringo is a great example of that. Most of you have parked a car at some point in a large town centre and run out of pound coins, and you've probably used the Ringo or pay-as-you-go app. Most of their interactions go straight through the automated process, but they have really good escape hatches built in, so you can percolate back up to the contact center if you need to. And final, just a couple of things to mention. I mean, we are Cisco and Avaya DevConnect solution partners, and we're also a Microsoft Gold partner. So we work extremely closely with Microsoft in their development labs in terms of the integrations into Microsoft Teams and the contact center and customer service frontline worker platforms. We've got a whole range of products that are, released within the last few months. Some of them literally releasing in the next week, where all of the contact center, all of our quality management, our call and billing systems, and our operator consoles, all Microsoft Teams compliant, along with all the other partners that we talked about. And if you want to find more about those particular platforms, these are the links. Everything I've talked about today has a supporting ebook, report, and e-guide, case studies, and videos. So if you visit our website at the link below, they're all there for download. And finally, if you want to kind of feel it for real, on November the 5th, Bonfire Night, we're doing a webinar in conjunction with Microsoft, Tina Shepherd from Microsoft, and one of our customers, Flowgas. They are exactly what we've talked about, an organization that had to virtualize very rapidly, move from effectively a premise-based environment to a virtual cloud environment, leveraging Teams and all the other good stuff with it. And we're going to walk through their journey over the last 5 months, how they've evolved their business and what their plans are for the next year. So just to conclude, final slide, we're all living in a box in some way, shape or form, and it's ultimately all of our choice whether we stay there or not. And I think for many businesses, between now and Christmas is the perfect time to start to think about your 2021 strategy and plan, and how you take forward the tactical changes you made this year, and you start to turn them into something more pragmatic and strategic for next. So with that said, I'm going to thank you all for being so patient and listening to me today, and I'm going to hand it back to Jonathan.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Jeremy. Very, very interesting. If you could hide the slides, then what we'll do is we'll invite questions. So if you've got questions, please do type them into the chat, and then we'll pose them to Jeremy. Whilst we're waiting for those to come in, I think there's a common theme that is emerging through through the 3 days, which is first of all measuring outcomes. So it's not about tasks; it's actually about the outcome. Experience is key. So I like the point there that to understand the customer experience and the employee experience, a lot of that is really within people's that insight is within people's minds. So it's not easy to access the data. So it creates the need for measurement and feedback loops. So are there particular tools that you'd suggest for that work well for understanding and measuring customer experience and employee experience?
Yeah, I mean, the two kind of key tools that we tend to see, the Enghouse offer that we tend to see people, consume are our real-time speech analytics platform. So it's a really powerful platform that effectively, when you're in a conversation with somebody, the platform can listen in the background, understand what's being said. It understands how things are being said, so whether the right language is being used, and it can also understand to a degree what the problem is. So for example, if you sort of phoned up and said, my dishwasher's not working, and the agent asked you what the model number is, instantly the system can kind of go off and interrogate the company's knowledge base and pull up a crib sheet for the agent to help talk them through. Equally, it can listen and understand, is the customer becoming aggressive, overly assertive, all of these kind of soft measurements, and maybe pull in a supervisor. So, if you've got a relatively new employee, handling a call that is quite stressful, the ability to do that and pull someone more experienced onto the call to assist is important. And it's interesting, I was watching, probably like everyone these days, watching these kind of 999 shows, and they were showing the London ambulance service, and just it's mind-blowing the type of calls that they're having to deal with, but also the way people speak to them. And when you're watching the show, the supervisor is actually sat physically next to the new recruit and can kind of see the body language of the new recruit, and can kind of hear what she's saying back, and they make a personal decision there and then to jump on and into that call to assist them. Well, that's really hard when everyone's virtualized. When you're sat kind of in your home dealing with somebody talking like that to you, the supervisor can't see that your body language is you're getting stressed. They can't hear what you're saying. So, our quality management suite, which, combined with the real-time speech analytics, the quality management suite is picking up on those triggers, and allows, call screen recording, all of that kind of great stuff, but also allows, a degree of measurement that is based on outcomes and not just sort of average handle times of a call.
And I think that's really important, is that the measurements that we use today to actually ensure that we're delivering an appropriate customer experience and employee experience have got to change, right? And I think elements such as stress, sentiment, emotion, that's going to come more to the fore. And I think when we're looking at designing these customer journeys and trying to look at what good looks like, a lot of this is about frictionless and making it easy for people to do business with you, irrespective of whether you start in a technology route, in a bot route of automation, or whether you hand over to people. It's trying to have that insight, have that data that you can actually pinpoint where the improvement areas are. That's going to be important.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
We've got a question in from Patricia, which is, what are the top tools to analyze the contact center performance?
Well, I mean, again, from our point of view, there's a couple of things that, to look at. I think you've got that quality management suite, you've got the real-time speech analytics, and then we also, Enghouse also acquired a company last year called Eptica, and that's primarily around email automation. So, when we talked about 86% of journeys being voice or email, having effectively a bot to respond to the email is great. But, when we bought Eptica, we also acquired a piece of their technology called Veco. And Veco is that sort of big data analytics. So if you think about real-time speech analytics and our quality management suite as being real-time, they're measuring stuff as it's happening and providing sort of feedback and triggers in real time. Veco is more about looking at batches of data over a longer period of time and then extrapolating out the trend. So it can start to tell you, this is where lots of your customer journeys seem to stall. So it's a bit like when you're on a website and people look at, there's 3 web pages to get to the checkout button on the shopping cart, and everyone gets to page 2 and then it freezes and stops. What's scaring people on page 2 to progress to the shopping cart? It's a little bit like that. So it can look at the trend data of multiple customers, multiple profiles of customers, and start to give you a map of, these are some of the areas where things are going wrong. And then finally, you've got your kind of post-call satisfaction survey, so all the usual kind of net promoter score type of stuff. And when you overlay that with, some of the softer measures that you pull out of the real-time speech platform, you can start to sense, customers get stressed when, they get asked this question. So, for example, one of our customers works in really highly regulated space around, consumer loans. And so it's really, really important that they stick to the phrases that the Financial Conduct Authority says are acceptable. And actually what they found was they can sense, as you look at the batch data for the customers, as they start to read out one of these certain phrases, the stress level in their customer goes through the roof. I can't remember what the phrase was, but it's probably one of those, like, if you don't keep up your payments, you might lose your home. And so they were actually able to go back to the FCSA with that data and suggest a change to that phrase, and that's what was done. So again, there's lots of ways of using data intelligently, but I guess one of the caveats, and one of the things that was in the presentation, is really don't get overly wrapped up around data. There's a lot of people and consultancies that make an awful lot of money out of selling this big data bandwagon. And actually, if you come back to what are the 80-20 rule, what are the journeys that matter, what are the channels that really matter, what are the customers that really matter, and now just think about what's the minimal amount of data I need to get this journey to work really well. That's the right starting point, because you can go snowblind with data really quickly.
Yeah, and I think that's an important aspect, is the trend analysis, to actually spot the areas that do need to be addressed and help you prioritize the review and the continual improvement. It can't only be about individual issues each and every time, because you're right, you'll just get absolutely swamped with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. So that brings us up to time for the first session. Jeremy, really interesting. Thank you very much for your time. Hope you've all enjoyed the first presentation of the day. The next presentation will be at 10 o'clock, so we've got 4 minutes. It will be Shamim Smiley from Mitel, looking at CX designed with humans in mind. So probably looking at that next piece around the change in the role around agents and moving more towards problem solvers, not transactional work. So thank you very much, and we'll catch you shortly. Same place in 4 minutes. Thank you. Cheers, Jeremy.
Thanks a lot. Bye.